Hello lovelies, welcome and welcome back to another episode of Some Thoughts. In this series, we discuss and meditate on different topics pertaining to anarchism, communism, black feminism, and the black radical tradition. And it's chill vibes all around. My name is Xenia if it's your first time here, and without further ado, let's talk about representation. So what got me thinking about this topic is my own film practice. If any of you have seen my shorts, you know that I use exclusively black performers. It's definitely an aesthetic choice, but it's also a result of me picking from the actresses and performers that I'm familiar with and that I know that I can work with. Then it comes to, is it important for me to show these visuals accompanied with black faces, or does race not matter? I guess a white film boy on YouTube who thinks he's a critic might say that race doesn't matter, and then because race doesn't matter, will advocate for a white person to inhabit a role. And Filmboy might not know it, but he just exposed himself. Whiteness is not a race. It's the absence of race. It's the state of not having to be concerned about race in a country full of racist institutions. It's the privilege of getting to be colorblind because nobody has ever acknowledged whiteness as anything but the default. So when Filmboy says race doesn't matter, he's saying the role should be raceless, and racelessness is white. There are a lot of things Filmboy doesn't know about representation, so it's best not to listen to him. Representation in media comes from what the creators of media want the audience to perceive about their own society, sometimes just in itself, but also in comparison to other cultures. It can be both conscious and unconscious and can be framed in a number of different ways. Because I'm black, I'll be talking about black representation and relating it back to my experience and my work. I'm going to be talking about three main works of media: Bamboozled, directed by Spike Lee; Green Book, directed by I don't know who, but it doesn't matter; and Pose, created by Ryan Murphy. So black people tend not to shy away from race in our artwork because it tends to be an everyday, normalized thing that we deal with. Sometimes it's the reason we're killed, sometimes it's the reason someone reports us at work, sometimes it's the reason that we can't find hair care products in the store. But whatever it is, it's always there, and no one's gonna let us forget it. And whenever we discuss race, granted, if we're not complete fools, like Tyler Perry, it has some nuance to it. Take Marlon Riggs, his documentary Black Is, Black Ain't is all about the nuances of blackness and highlights intersectional identities like queer black folks and black women. I think one of the best narrative films, though, to highlight the nuances of blackness is Spike Lee's film Bamboozled, which, if you're not ready for what's on the cover right here, you're not ready to watch the movie. The way that everyone is represented in this film, even though it can get ridiculous sometimes, is very, very specific. The uptight, social climbing, ambitious main character, Pierre Delacroix's life is heavily governed by respectability politics. If you're unfamiliar with that term, there's suggested and easily digestible readings on it in the description. He works at a TV network and wants to appropriate whiteness as best he can so he can have what they have. He wants to make media. He wants to control a narrative. His boss, Dunwoody, is every white boy who fetishizes blackness. We all know him and we all hate him. He calls Pierre his nigga and claims he's more black than him because he keeps up with black culture and has mixed kids. In addition to those previous offenses, he also turns down every single show idea of Pierre's that depicts black people as in any way intelligent or as full human beings. So Pierre wants to be fired from this job because they're not working with him, he can't work with them, it's hell. So he hatches like a little stunt to get fired, and he proposes a minstrel show. This is a minstrel show, I'm sure you're all familiar. And instead of saying that's crazy and racist, the network is like, okay, you're talking, I'm listening. The two actors that get hired to be on Pierre's show, Man Ray and Womack, are borderline homeless people. They're discovered performing on the street, if I remember correctly, living on the edges of poverty. And Pierre's assistant, Sloane Hopkins, who wants to distance herself from the show after it becomes a hit, is like a young Pierre. She looks up to him. She's very educated and ambitious, just like he is. And after Pierre is consumed by the show, completely brainwashed into thinking that his work is a work of genius simply because the racist audience loves it so much. Sloane is his consciousness. She never stops reminding him that what he's making has negative consequences. But look at how specifically each character is represented. Dunwitty and Pierre's relationship is great commentary on the boundaries of whiteness. Dunwitty can act as trashy as he wants to. He's still white and he's still got a top executive position at a television network. Pierre is Harvard educated. He gave himself a French name, trying to distance himself as much as he can from blackness. He's highly perceptive and knowledgeable, but he will never get past Dunwitty. Pierre will never have what a white man has, even if he's completed all the steps and checked all the boxes. Dunwitty's position in the company represents an institutional problem rather than an individual one. If Dunwitty was just some average guy on the street being an asshole, the content wouldn't have as much weight. Poverty also plays a huge role in the success of the minstrel show. They hired poor workers that would be willing to do this demeaning work just to have their needs met. Their raw talent becomes a consumable commodity as they dress it up, or more appropriately, dress it down in the most dehumanizing way. It allows the audience to ignore the human being inside of the costume. The use of blackface itself to cover up actual black people's faces directly shows the purpose of blackface in the popular culture of the 19th and 20th centuries. Through blackface, black people, black personhood, and black humanity can be erased. If white audiences can laugh at blackface, they can ignore black issues. Sloane being the only main woman in the cast, a black woman, just speaks to how much black women are always on damage control. Black women have been advocating for themselves, queer black folks, disabled black folks for much longer than a lot of male-centric black power movements have. And I feel like that is somewhat illustrated by Sloane in the film. I could go on and on about this movie. It is so good. Aside from some acting issues that you get pretty used to, it just becomes sort of the diegesis of the film. This film is conceived, shot, and edited so excellently, and I highly recommend it. It's really hard to find. From what I've seen, you either have to buy the DVD or torrent it. Like, you can't even stream it anywhere. So if anyone finds a reliable link, please share it with us all. We love cinema. I don't have time to play it here, and I'll probably get copyright striked if I show it, but I'm gonna link it in the description. There is a great scene that really exemplifies the theory of double consciousness thought up by W.E.B. Du Bois, and it's absolutely excellent, so go watch that. Love it. If you can't find the movie, at least watch this. It is so good. Okay. As smart and as knowledgeable as Spike is about his black history, film history, and black film history, most mainstream award-winning movies are not nearly this intelligent. Green Book infuriated me to no end. I remember when I saw it, and I remember when it won Best Picture. So much pain, so much pain. Where Bamboozled has diverse and thoughtful representation, representing characters across race, class, and gender, and having specific intersections represented for specific commentary. Green Book is so simple and so wrong. The story is told from the perspective of Tony, a white, Italian, middle-class everyman with a wife and people who care about him. His is the ideal middle-class life, but he has one flaw. He's a racist. And the whole film exists to follow Tony on his journey to the bare minimum of tolerance. It's all about how one guy is a racist. In the 1960s, mind you, where institutionalized racism exists unapologetically, and one guy has to change. So by the end of the film, racism is solved because it's solved within the main framing device of the story, which is Tony's experience. Even racist institutions are used as a device to help Tony grow and change. And he only changes because the black guy he has to interact with is a world-class pianist, super polite, talks in a way that white people are comfortable with, and is already relatively wealthy. This is where respectability comes in again. But the gist of it is that if I can behave like a respectable, productive member of society, then they'll give me my rights, which is baloney. The requirements of respectability are always judged by the oppressor, so the goalpost is always moving. What a white person can do and still be respectable is not the same thing as what a black person can do and still be respectable. And this film plays into that. If Tony had to drive around funkadelic instead of a lone classical pianist, would he still make it to tolerance by the end of the movie? This is how you use representation to maintain a racist status quo. This movie said some bad apples. This movie said that one governor shouldn't have poisoned Flint's water. That wasn't right. This movie said not all Trump supporters are racist.
Of course they're not, but they have no problem supporting racist policies, so it doesn't really matter what the fuck is in their hearts.
Let's talk about Pose. Pose is really interesting because there are no tokenized characters. Even the white boy isn't tokenized. Even though most of the characters are black and brown, each of them have their own intersectional identity. Their characters aren't equated with their identities. Their experience is shaped by their identity, but they're more than just black trans number 1, 2, 3, and 4. This show perfectly illustrates that there is power in numbers. It doesn't matter if this show had Candy and Lulu be antagonists for a season, because their transness doesn't make them villains. The show isn't saying transness makes you a villain because almost every main character is trans. Tokenized characters tend to represent an entire race, gender, class, or just be ignored by the plot in general until their white friends need help. And Pose really said, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that. And what Pose does for transness specifically is takes the control of the narrative of gender out of the hands of cisgender people, cisgender writers. With Pose, they get to be more than the dead whore on a cop show, and that has a lot of value. So now, why do I choose black performers to be in my work? Because the medium of film is visual and I am telling my stories. People don't care about what's behind the camera, they only know what they see. And if I have my story told by a white actor in my film, that further pushes my experience into the shadows, while diversity in white stories and experiences is highlighted once again as the everyman experience. I'm expressing the beauty that I find in myself as well as the world around me. So in Good Blood, a short film I made maybe a year ago, I chose a young black actress because a lot of young black women get abortions or have unplanned pregnancies and are forced into hiding it because of shame. Shame of our moms, shame of our grandmas, shame of our aunties, our cousins, shame from our male relatives who now look down on us when we've been taking care of them their whole lives. If we're hiding in shame, that limits our access to get the help that we need and makes us extremely vulnerable to abusive situations. Hiding it only works against us. And if I showed a white girl with my personal commentary of my experience over it, that is another way of hiding it. Nuance around abortion is always shown through the lens of a respectable white woman who's married and who had to have the procedure or she would die, or something like that, something grave. But what about the young black girl who chose this and is happy with her decision? It opened up her future in ways that would never be possible with having a baby that young. In my short film, My Boyfriend Looks Like a Lion, I showed my boyfriend in such a soft, beautiful light. He's glowing pink, the images are so peaceful, he looks like he's in heaven. Far from mainstream images of black men being either hyper-masculine or complete clowns. My film Stroke is about my dad, who financially abused and gaslit my mom, and was largely the reason that my little brother was bordering malnourishment as a baby. It's a common experience for Black kids to have absent or abusive fathers, partially because prison takes fathers away from their families, and partially because of the toxic hypermasculine culture that we have in our community. It's a film in one single shot about me encountering the ghost of my dad, who died from a stroke. I used the symptoms of a stroke to determine the camera movement and used it as a device to explain the disorienting nature of dealing with his legacy. Representation means a lot for people of color. It's the difference between feeling seen and heard and being ignored like we constantly are. Representation can be good, bad, or solely about catharsis, but whatever its purpose, it's always important. Everything you see in movies and shows is intentional. Even if accidents happen on set, the filmmakers make choices of what stays in the film and what gets cut. If they didn't want you to see it, it wouldn't be there. Always consider what the creator, writer, director, or I guess studio is trying to tell you about the world and or themselves. In short, representation matters in more ways than one. Don't ignore it. So that's it for me. I hoped this helped you think about representation in a different way. A lot of people talk about the corporate diversity quota, so I wanted to come at it from a different perspective, from the perspective of a Black woman filmmaker. I hope you enjoyed the look. I was inspired by syrup, and that reminded me of Aunt Jemima, and that's how I sort of came up with this whole topic. If you like what I'm doing here, I have a few ways that you can support me. The first one is free. You can like this video, leave a comment to sacrifice to the algorithm, and you can subscribe. If you're looking for more makeup content, you can follow me at Gladstick on Instagram, and if you want to support me with your coins, you can head over to patreon.com/thematthews to check out the tiers. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I want to thank my patrons for making this possible. Big thanks to Chilled Plums, Ferocious Bay, Kelly Pierre, Karina Lynn, SG, Ruby Iris Urick, Stina Gordon, Nick Rogers, and Rachel Christie. Another huge thanks to everyone that helped me get Kiera's car out of car jail. So Audrey, Jesse, Liam, Rose, Riley, Victoria, Kelly, Samantha, Rachel, Lee, Kayla, Stina, Christian, Anna, Leanna, Cody, Angela, A Lil Out There, Dion, Alex L, Talia, Pierre Louis, Alex S, and Jaquavius. Thank you so much. As always, there are readings in the description to help you understand a little bit more about concepts that you're unfamiliar with that I discussed here, and all of the links to the films that I could find and that one clip from Bamboozled is going to be in the description. Y'all all make my experience online so much brighter. I learn, I grow, and I hope I'm giving just a fraction of that back to y'all. I love y'all, and I will see you in the next one. Mwah.